Katie Hopkins just delivered the most brutal political takedown in recent memory, and Keir Starmer was the helpless target. In a live television confrontation that is already being called the most savage political roasting of 2024, Hopkins systematically destroyed every single immigration promise Starmer has ever made, exposed his breathtaking hypocrisy, and left the Prime Minister looking like a deer caught in headlights while trying to decode public opinion polls. What you are about to witness isn't just another political debate. This is a masterclass in how to dismantle a politician's credibility in real time, broadcast live to millions of viewers who watched Starmer's carefully constructed image crumble under the weight of his own contradictions. The footage is going viral for all the right reasons. And by the end of this, you'll understand why even Starmer's own supporters are struggling to defend him. It started when Hopkins, never one to pull punches, looked directly at the Prime Minister and delivered words that have already become legendary. Starmer now says he is the guy that is going to control our borders. The same Starmer that decriminalized illegal immigration, prioritized illegals over our own people, threw them into luxury hotels, and wanted to make sure anyone who spoke out against illegal immigration was called far-right and put in prison. But now suddenly he is all for border control. The silence in that studio was deafening. You could literally watch Starmer's face drain of color as Hopkins continued her relentless assault on his flip-flopping record. This wasn't political theater. This was a public execution of everything Starmer claimed to stand for. And the man simply had no answer. Hopkins wasn't finished with the precision of a surgeon and the mercy of a hurricane. She continued. He also says that those arriving in our country should speak English. Maybe he could go to Birmingham, Bradford, Luton, Leicester, or any other of his voting areas and say that, because none of them will understand a bloody word. The audience erupted, but Starmer just sat there, looking confused and exhausted, like he'd just woken up in a library he didn't remember entering. What makes this confrontation so devastating isn't just Hopkins' brutal honesty, it is the fact that every single word she said is documented, verifiable truth. For years, Starmer built his political career on one immigration stance, now facing electoral disaster. He has completely reversed course and hoping nobody notices. Hopkins noticed, and she brought receipts. The real genius of Hopkins' attack was how she exposed the electoral calculation behind Starmer's flop. She didn't just criticize his policies, she revealed the cynical political machine behind them. "You got beaten by Reform UK," she stated with devastating accuracy. "So now, you say you cannot stand illegal immigration. You are the ones that will control the border. You can trust us. We will stop them coming." Think about what this means. Hopkins just exposed that Starmer doesn't have principles. He has polling data. His immigration policy isn't based on what is best for Britain. It is based on what wins elections. And when that strategy failed spectacularly against Reform UK's surge, he simply adopted their talking points while hoping everyone would forget his previous positions. The most damaging moment came when Hopkins addressed Starmer's complete reversal on language requirements for immigrants. For years, suggesting that people coming to Britain should speak English was considered racist by Starmer's Labour Party. Anyone making such arguments was dismissed, marginalized, and often accused of far-right extremism. Now, suddenly, Starmer is making exactly the same argument he once condemned. Hopkins held up this contradiction like a mirror, forcing Starmer and everyone watching to confront the uncomfortable reality that the Prime Minister's convictions change based on electoral convenience. Starmer treats immigration like a game of hopscotch, Hopkins observed with cutting accuracy, trying to dodge invisible landmines, appeasing the left, pleasing the right, and confusing everyone else. The result, as Hopkins brutally noted, is a stance so bland it makes lukewarm porridge seem daring. Starmer has managed to simultaneously anger immigration hawks who don't trust his sudden conversion and immigration advocates who feel betrayed by his abandonment of their cause. It is political incompetence on a scale rarely seen in modern British politics. But Hopkins wasn't content to simply expose Starmer's flopping. She went deeper, revealing the demographic cynicism behind his original immigration stance. Her analysis of Labour strongholds wasn't just political commentary, it was a surgical dissection of how modern electoral politics actually works. Stripped of all the noble rhetoric about public service and national interest, The uncomfortable truth Hopkins exposed is that Starmer's original immigration policies weren't designed to help Britain. They were designed to secure voting blocks in specific constituencies. His sudden reversal isn't based on new evidence about what works. It is based on polling showing his original strategy was electoral suicide. What made Hopkins' performance so compelling wasn't just her willingness to say what others wouldn't. It was her complete preparation. Every attack was backed by evidence. Every criticism was supported by Starmer's own previous statements. She didn't rely on speculation or personal insults. She simply held up Starmer's record and let it speak for itself. The Prime Minister's response, or rather his complete lack of response, was perhaps the most telling aspect of the entire confrontation. Here was a man who has spent his entire political career crafting careful, focus-grouped responses to every possible question. But when faced with the simple reality of his own contradictions, laid bare with brutal clarity, he had absolutely nothing to say. Hopkins observed this paralysis with the eye of someone who has spent years watching politicians squirm under pressure. Every time Starmer delivers a line, she noted with devastating accuracy, it is like watching a malfunctioning Siri read a press release. You almost imagine him practicing in front of a mirror, then apologizing to it for wasting its time. This wasn't just political commentary, this was psychological analysis, delivered with the precision of someone who understands exactly how modern political theater works and isn't afraid to call it out. Hopkins revealed that Starmer's entire public persona is performance art, carefully designed to avoid taking any position that might offend anyone. The immigration reversal is just one example of a broader pattern Hopkins identified. She systematically went through Starmer's positions on law and order, economic policy, and international relations, showing how each one shifts based on polling rather than principle. His idea of being relatable, Hopkins observed, is popping into Greg's for a sausage roll and calling it research. But perhaps the most devastating part of Hopkins' takedown was her analysis of what this flip-flopping reveals about Starmer's fitness for leadership. She didn't just criticize his policies, she questioned his fundamental capacity to lead a nation through difficult times. When major issues hit, she pointed out, he holds his breath like he is playing hide and seek with his own opinions. This goes to the heart of what leadership actually means. In times of crisis, nations need leaders who have clear principles and the courage to stand by them even when it is politically costly. Hopkins exposed that Starmer offers the exact opposite, a man so desperate to avoid offending anyone that he ends up standing for nothing. The reaction to Hopkins' performance has been immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with clips of her most devastating lines. Political commentators across the spectrum acknowledged that she had identified something fundamentally troubling about Starmer's approach to governance. Even some Labour supporters admitted privately that she had raised questions they couldn't answer. What makes this confrontation historically significant isn't just the entertainment value, though Hopkins certainly delivered on that front. It is that she managed to crystallize in a few brutal minutes what many people have been sensing about Starmer but couldn't quite articulate. She revealed that beneath all the careful messaging and focus-grouped positions, there is simply no there. Hopkins showed that Starmer's immigration U-turn isn't just a policy disagreement, it is a window into a much deeper problem with his entire approach to leadership. A politician who reverses core positions based on polling isn't adapting to new circumstances, he is revealing that his original positions weren't based on genuine conviction in the first place. The international implications of this revelation are staggering. Britain needs leaders who can be trusted by allies and adversaries alike to maintain consistent positions based on national interest rather than electoral calculation. Hopkins exposed that Starmer offers precisely the opposite, a leader whose positions change based on domestic political pressure. But Hopkins didn't stop at criticism. She also revealed the broader pattern of how this kind of politics damages democratic discourse itself. When politicians like Starmer treat major policy issues as mere electoral positioning, they teach voters that political engagement is pointless because today's promises become tomorrow's U-turns. The most uncomfortable moment for Starmer came when Hopkins directly addressed the human cost of his policy flip-flops. Real people's lives are affected by immigration policy. Communities are shaped by these decisions. Hopkins pointed out that treating such serious issues as political footballs shows a fundamental disrespect for both the British people and those seeking to come to Britain. This wasn't abstract political theory. Hopkins was highlighting how Starmer's approach to governance treats actual human beings as props in his electoral strategy. Whether someone supports or opposes particular immigration policies, most people expect their leaders to have genuine convictions based on what they believe is best for the country. Hopkins' final observation was perhaps the most damning. Starmer isn't leading. He is just standing still and hoping no one notices. She revealed that what Starmer's supporters call pragmatism is actually paralysis. What they call careful consideration is actually an inability to make difficult decisions based on principle rather than polling. The broader lesson from Hopkins' takedown extends far beyond immigration policy or even Starmer himself. She demonstrated what happens when political leaders prioritize electoral calculation over genuine leadership. The result isn't just bad policy, it is the erosion of public trust in democratic institutions themselves. As the clips from this confrontation continue spreading across social media, generating millions of views and thousands of comments. One thing is clear, Hopkins didn't just embarrass Starmer. She exposed fundamental problems with how modern politics operates. Her brutal honesty may be uncomfortable, but it is exactly what democratic discourse needs. The question now isn't whether Starmer can recover from this public demolition of his credibility. It is whether he can learn from it. Can he develop genuine convictions that go beyond electoral calculation? Can he lead with principle rather than polling? Hopkins has given him a mirror. Whether he chooses to look into it will determine not just his political future, but the kind of leader Britain gets. In an age of carefully managed political messaging and focus, grouped responses, Hopkins reminded us what authentic political discourse actually looks like. It is uncomfortable, it is direct, and it doesn't worry about hurting feelings. Most importantly, it holds politicians accountable for their words and actions in ways that traditional political interviewing simply can't match. Starmer walked into that studio, thinking he was ready for a typical political interview. Instead, he got a masterclass in accountability from someone who doesn't play by the usual rules. The result was television gold and political devastation rolled into one unforgettable package that will be replayed for years to come. The aftermath has been swift and merciless within hours of the broadcast. Clips of Hopkins' most devastating lines were trending across every social media platform. The hashtag #StarmerExposed shot to #1 on Twitter, with millions sharing their favorite moments from the takedown. Political commentators who usually disagree on everything found rare unity in acknowledging that Hopkins had delivered something extraordinary, but perhaps most telling was the reaction from Starmer's own party. Labour MPs, usually quick to defend their leader, were conspicuously silent. Some privately admitted that Hopkins had articulated concerns they'd been harbouring, but were afraid to voice publicly. The uncomfortable truth is that many within Labour have watched Starmer's constant repositioning with growing unease, wondering if their party stands for anything beyond electoral calculation. The international media picked up the story within hours, with outlets from across Europe highlighting how Hopkins had exposed the instability of British political leadership. Foreign diplomats privately expressed concern about making long-term agreements with a government that appears to shift positions based on domestic polling rather than strategic thinking. This confrontation will be remembered not just for its entertainment value, but as a turning point in British political discourse. Hopkins proved that authentic accountability is possible when someone is willing to cut through the spin and demand real answers. The question now is whether other political interviewers will follow her lead, or if this remains a one-off moment of clarity in an otherwise choreographed political landscape.